Welcome to the Home Education with Ease podcast. I'm your host, Christine Furman, a homeschool mom, entrepreneur, and educator with over 20 years of experience in the areas of elementary and special education. It's my mission to help you create lifelong learners and embrace a holistic approach to education at home. I'll be sharing practical strategies, inspiration, and resources to support your family. Whether you're a stay-at-home mom, a business owner, or balancing work and homeschool, you're in the right place to connect with a community that values education just as much as you do. Join us each week as we ditch the stress, embrace the joy of learning, and set your family up for a lifetime of success. Hello, friend, and welcome back to the Home Education with Ease podcast. I'm your host, Christine Furman, your home education expert. Well, over the past few weeks, we have been talking about raising confident readers. So how can we instill this confidence in our children to ensure they are solid, confident readers? Well, one of the biggest things is reading aloud with our children. All of that story time from the time they are little, going through books, looking at the pictures, and, allowing them to read, in quotation marks, them just telling you what's happening and you reading aloud with them and going to story time. All of that is so important for their reading development. And I shared all about that in episode 114. And then last week, we talked about how reading different genres like nonfiction and fiction and poetry and fairy tales and all of those genres are helping them to really visualize what's happening. Again, that reading out loud, that reading together is allowing them to understand what's happening. It's allowing them to be creative, use their imagination and say, yeah, I can picture in my mind what is happening. Or if we incorporate videos that are educational, that go along with the theme, it allows them to grasp the concept so much more. So I talked last week about how we did a safari theme and we just brought in many different genres. We watched videos and then my children on their own created a whole safari scene. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about reading aloud, allowing them to hear and have that confidence to say, yeah, I remember what happened. I retained some of that information and I can tell you about a certain topic. In our case, it was about the animals in the savannah. But what if your child is struggling to read? What if they have a difficult time listening and they can't comprehend what is being read to them? What if when they go to learn to read, it's a struggle? They are struggling to make the sounds, to put the sounds together, to make the words happen, to read bigger words. Like all of that is a struggle for them. Spelling, writing, comprehension, fluency, how fast they are reading. It's all difficult. And why is this happening? This is what we're going to talk about today. Why do we feel that so many children may be falling behind? And I say that in quotations because there really is no behind here. Our children are learning at the right pace to meet their needs. And their needs can be totally different. You have to think about family dynamics. You have to think about family situations. You have to think about school, wherever they're at. If they're in school, if they're homeschooled, private school. What is the strategy and how are they learning how to read? And we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about the different strategies and why, what is so important to develop their fundamental skills for reading and what are things that are being missed right now. We're going to talk about screens and how that has impacted their learning and their reading. And just remember, every situation is different. I work with families in all different situations. And sometimes I have to just have that gentle reminder to say, You are right where you're supposed to be. Your child is right where they're supposed to be because of these situations that have happened in their life. And next week, we're going to talk more about that. We're going to dive more into their nervous system and how when that's regulated, it's easier for them to learn things. And when things may be going on, stress, trauma, it may be more difficult. And we're also going to talk more about screens next week as well and how that's affecting their learning. But today, we're going to be diving into why are we falling behind? Well, it's not your fault as the parent. You know how important reading is. It's important for their confidence, their independence, and all of the learning that has to occur in their entire life. Reading is that fundamental piece that is so important and so crucial for learning because you use reading in everything that we do, right? So it's not your fault. And our kids, they're pretty confident and not confident, but they're capable. We want them to be confident, right? So if they're struggling, there may be a lack of confidence, but they're capable. But what is the missing piece? So we're going to talk about that today. What are some of the missing pieces that could be contributing to this struggle of reading? So if your child is struggling to read, I would love to know, as we go through some of these things, what is something that resonates the most with you? What stands out to say, yes, that right there is, I can see why that is causing my child to struggle in this area. I would love to know that. So join the Home Education with Ease Facebook group where we come together as a community and say, you're not alone, because you are not alone. I'm here with you. I'm here to walk alongside you every step of the way by sharing resources and support and guidance to say, you got this. Just sometimes we need to figure out what are those missing pieces. And I want you also to think the world of learning has changed dramatically over the past few years. Think about all the changes that have occurred, especially within the past 6 years. But how things have totally changed, right? Most of us listening probably grew up in the 80s, 90s, the early 2000s maybe, right? But what has been the big difference? I know for me, I grew up in the 90s, and reading for us in elementary school. Now, here's the true story from my reading. I was not a great reader. And there are still times that I'm like, I should know how to say that word. And sometimes I have to take a minute to think about it and sound it out differently than I probably should have to. Why is that? Because in first grade, they changed up the curriculum. And my mom told me this. I learned this years later. They changed up the curriculum, and we were the guinea pigs that year. So if your children are in school, I want you to kind of keep that in mind. You don't have control over how they're teaching your children how to read. If you're homeschooling, you do have control over that, but you need to know what are the pieces that are important. Because again, you can buy a curriculum and they could be teaching reading one specific way, and your children could still be missing crucial skills, right? So this is where I bring it all together and say, all of these skills are so important, not one skill over the other. And this is what I've done, creating my curriculum for everything that I do, but especially the Reading Fundamentals program, because we pulled all of those skills together because they're all important. So when I was in school, kindergarten, we were playing. Let me know if you guys remember this. So if you're listening and you're in the Facebook group or you're following me on Instagram, I would love to hear from you. Send me a quick message. Send me a DM, send a message in the Facebook group and say, yes, I remember kindergarten, how we were playing with the kitchen. I just remember this so vividly. Right now, I can imagine the kitchen. It was like a wooden kitchen. It was not anything like plastic that we have now, right? It was this solid wood. We had metal pots and pans, and we played. And we had cars, and we had dress up, and I remember my teacher had all of these letter pillows that were hanging from the ceiling, and one letter a week. So each week she would take one of those pillows down, and that's how we knew what letter we were learning that week. And we would hold that pillow, or we saw that pillow. It was a visual, and it was play-based. That is why EduPlay learning is so near and dear to my heart, because it's all about bringing that play-based, hands-on learning back into our education system. Because by taking it out, we have stripped our children of a lot of fundamental skills. They need to play. They need to do things with their hands to learn. And I just remember, that's what we did in kindergarten. We weren't expected to know how to read. We weren't expected to know our letters and our sounds and our sight words and all of the things that a lot of kindergartners are expected to know how to do. They should already know their sight words. They should already know all of their letters and their sounds. And yes, while I'm saying practice with your children and teach them, because the EduPlay learning programs and curriculum and the method starts as early as 2 years old. I mean, if you're going to talk about reading aloud, that goes way back to infancy, right? But let's just say right now we're going to be really engaging with our children with this play-based learning. That starts at 2. So from 2 to 5, if your kids go to school, those 3 years are so important for you to be developing the skills with them, not leaving all the learning up to the school system. And if you're homeschooling and educating your kids at home, that learning happens all the time, all day long, which is one of the main reasons why I homeschool, because we are learning all day long. And I started teaching my kids at a very young age, 6 months, right? 18 months, 2 years, they were doing these skills naturally. It was never forced. It was never, you've got to do this. You've got to learn how to read. Now, I do have to say the first 2 years or few years, I was still working. So I had to make intentional time and work with them when I was off over the weekend and in the evenings or over the summer. Now, I was a teacher, so I had the summertime off. Or I also had someone that was with my children and would take them to story time or would read with them. I had those expectations of, here are all of our books. Read to them all the time. We're not going to sit and watch TV. We're not going to use screens. We are going to interact. And I highly, highly recommend that for your younger kiddos. Interact with them. That's all they want. That's all they need. Talking to them in an adult voice. And then as they continue to develop, you're reading with them. You are talking about the stories and what's happening. And if you do watch a show, ask them, what happened in this story, in this show? Were they acting kind or were they not? So have those conversations with them. All right, we're kind of going on a tangent here, but I just really wanted to just kind of keep in mind things are totally different from the time that we grew up to even now within the past 6 to 10 years. Things have dramatically changed as well. And that play-based learning is very important. And the expectation of knowing how to read, we didn't learn how to read until first grade. Okay. And like I said, they changed the curriculum. So I didn't have a very solid foundation. Now, does that mean that I can't learn and that's it? Forget it. You missed that crucial learning time and I'm going to be behind? No. Let me tell you a little secret that teaching my children how to read and creating the curriculum that I'm creating, I have continued to learn new skills even at 40 years old. And now I'm 41, I know, but as I've been creating this, right? So it's never too late to learn. You got to keep learning and keep growing. So I want you to think about this. Let's think about our children are struggling, and why are they struggling, right? It's so much more common right now. And the parents are like, what do we do? What, right? Are you asking those questions? What are we doing? Well, there's so many factors, and it's a lot of the screens. It's a lot of the learning gaps, especially during the pandemic years. And let's understand the why of how we can support our children throughout this, because they do need these educational and developmental, learning goals and skills that maybe have been missed. Okay. So think about during the pandemic, Ella was in preschool. So it was her second year of preschool. In March, it just shut down, right? So I started doing work with her. I was already doing work with her because at that time I had resigned from my teaching position and now stayed home with both Ella and Alex at that point. So I was already doing a lot of work. I was already working with families and teaching them and hosting events. And then when the pandemic happened, they said, Christine, we don't know what to do. So I started recording and going live and reading stories and giving them activities and things to do with their kids at home. And that was something that I was already doing with my children. So then as you get into kindergarten, right, let's just go Ella's timeline, because Ella really was the pandemic year, right? And then even 2-3 years ahead of her as well, those crucial years for reading. So let's just look at that timeline and say that's all important time, because let's say if Ella went into kindergarten that next year of the fall of 2020, she would have been wearing masks, or they would have been wearing masks, the teacher and the students. They would have had plexiglass, desks or whatever. They would have been learning online. All of that is detrimental to their developmental skills. If you can't see the mouth and the lips and the movement, you're missing so much of that. If you can't play and have hands-on and have interaction with your educator, you're missing so much. And that's what happened to so many of our children. They learned through a screen. They learned with masks. They missed out on that interaction with their classmates, with their teachers. And think about all of us, our nervous systems were they were dysregulated, okay? Parents were learning how and figuring out how to work from home while also figuring out how to teach their children and make sure that they could get on a computer screen from home. So now you have screen time for everyone while adding stress and saying, you got to know how to do this. You got to get on. You got to, right? Very stressful time for everyone. So that's not good for our nervous system. And we're going to talk about that next week. But think about all the learning programs now that have turned digitally. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with an app that is supplemental. We use IXL as a supplemental piece to our curriculum. It is not their sole educational component, but it is something that is supplemental, that they can practice skills that we have learned, or learn a new skill and say, oh yeah, or encounter a new skill and say, I know how to do this, but they did not learn how to read with an app. They learned how to read with me, one-to-one, and it can be done obviously in a classroom as well, but it needs to be intentional. And here's some of the things that we made sure were happening. I was reading to them all the time. I was reading, they were reading. They were watching me do the skill, and then they were being asked to do it. It's that modeling. It was repetition. It was constant. And sometimes it's like, oh my goodness, this is so boring, because it is repetitive. but we need that repetition for the skills to sink in. We have now gotten into this state of go, 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 go. If we don't understand it, we're moving on to the next thing, or 2 to 5 second attention spans. Nope, it's not grabbing my attention. I'm moving on to something new. And this is happening for everyone, not just our children, but especially our children when they're trying to learn new skills. And they're missing out on that interaction, right? Being able to laugh and talk and practice writing their letters and doing it multiple ways. Like when we did letters, we used, I have these plastic straws, or we did blocks, or it could be anything. It could be your snack, and say, okay, make me a letter A with your Cheerios that you're eating, right? So it doesn't have to be so hard to practice these skills, but it needs to be done. You need to have that interaction with your child to be able to practice these skills. It needs to be repetitive over and over and over again. For one whole week when they're learning their letters, talk about the letter A all the time. Words that begin with the letter A. Find the letter A throughout the house, throughout when you're driving, when you're watching a show. Talk about words that start with the letter A. Find fruit and food that starts with the letter A. Just make that part of your week and say, okay, today we're going to have avocados. That starts with an A. Write it down. Multisensory. I'm huge on doing things multisensory, where we're going to practice writing it with a pen and a marker and on the chalkboard and in the sand or outside on the sidewalk, right? There's so many different ways to just unlock these skills in your child's brain. And jumping and moving and all of those things are so important. And that practice, that listening, the phonics. How many times that I've seen nowadays over the past few years that schools and programs are teaching children just to memorize words. And that drives me crazy. Yes, there are sight words that we need to know how to say. I do a combination of sight words and phonics. And sometimes you can do phonics with your sight words. I think right now automatically of me, he, be, she, right? Yes, those are sight words. And our kids, they're easy for our kids to oh yeah, I can say those words quickly. But as you are doing that, you can also be sounding it out. And even though they're only learning the short E sound, you can say, oh, well, you know what? The E also makes the long E sound. So in this word, the E makes or says its name. So let's sound it out. H, E, he. Now, what if we have sh, E, right? The SH makes the sh sound. Your kids may not have learned those skills per se yet, those lessons, but you can add those hidden lessons while you're teaching them their sight words or decoding, right? So all of those skills play a huge role in them learning how to read. They need to know how to sound out words. They need to know all of the sounds of words. They need to know how to quickly say a word like a sight word, but know that they can still sound it out mostly. And sometimes these letters don't say the sound that they're supposed to say or we think that they're supposed to say. And you can have fun with it. So sometimes those skills are missed or not taught at all, right? And sometimes we have to go backwards to move forward. And this is what I work with my students a lot of times on and say, you know what? I know according to the school grade or the standards, you should be reading at this level, but we're not. And why are we not? Well, let's find the gap. Let's figure out where you started to have a struggle. Where was it a challenge? And let's fix that. So sometimes we have to go back a few steps. Sometimes we have to go way back and talk about what was happening when this skill was being taught. And we're going to talk about that a lot more next week. Obviously, there's so much here. You know that I'm so passionate about this because teaching our kids to read is so important. Now, let's talk about the screens, right? By having our children on a screen, I can just think right now of so many of my students that are doing so much assessment time on a screen. And it breaks my heart because one, it's less interaction with an adult, their educator, right? And they're not hearing the prompt or the question from a person. They're hearing it from a computer. So that right there is so difficult for me because one, they're not even being expected to read it. They're just expecting them to know these skills and be able to listen to it and answer because they've listened to it. It's a whole thing for me where it really does break my heart. There's too much assessment for our young kiddos, but if they're in school, if we are constantly pressured by the standards, right? And this goes for educating kids at home as well. If we feel that our children should be reading at a certain level, well, they're reading at second grade. They're reading chapter books at second grade. So my child should be reading at this level. Maybe, but they're not ready. So by giving them a chapter book and saying, you should know how to read this, read it, figure it out, now you're just stressing them out even more. And now they don't want to read. It's not enjoyable. And forget it. Reading to them is something that they hate. And I don't know about you, but I definitely don't want my kids to hate reading. I want them to enjoy it. I want them to be able to pick up a book at any time and be able to read it. So working on a screen is not ideal, which is why within my programs, we do screen time. Like I do a video, but then I say, but here's the activity that I want you to do with your child. That's the interaction. That's the hands-on play. And then I want them to show me what they know. There's the writing. It's all part of it because it's so important for their development. And yes, learning through screens is really a struggle for me for sure. It's definitely not something that I don't push it. I say, here's a tool that you can use as a supplement, but here is what you should be doing to teach the skills. So like I said, more screen time next week and more about their nervous system. And we've kind of like touched on a lot of the things that I was, wanting to express here is like rushing our children. Back in the 90s, we really weren't learning how to read until first grade and really having a good understanding until second grade. And now, like I said, you should know how to read in kindergarten, which when I hear that, it breaks my heart. Because I was like, no, they're still babies. They should just be playing. They should be using their imagination. They should be listening to you because guess what? By listening to you, they're learning that expression. When do I stop at a period? Like, what does that sound like? What does that look like, right? What does an exclamation mark mean? That intonation and that, when you're changing your voice for different reasons and question marks and all of that is so important for their development. So just kind of keeping that in mind. Your child's not behind. They're reading where they're supposed to be reading. And if they need support, I'm right here to support. And I can help go through with you what your children is doing, what your child is learning and say, okay, this is the skill we're missing. And this is what we need to do to improve and to develop that skill that was missed. Think about this too, rhyming, so important. And being able to rhyme on a computer is not the same as reading Cat in the Hat or fairy tales or nursery rhymes. Like those, yes, they don't always have the best morals or, moral of the story, right? But that rhyming is so important. That repetition is so important. and allowing our children just to be able to say these words and rhyme and just interact with their, like I said, their other friends and so much. So learning how the sounds are connecting to the letters, right? So here's something else too. I wasn't a strong reader, and that caused frustration and embarrassment for me. So when I was in school, and I remember 5th, 6th, 7th grade, middle school age, it probably was happening at younger ages as well, but not nearly as bad as middle school, where we would do popcorn reading around the room, and I hated it so much. I disliked it so much because I did not want to read out loud in front of my entire classmates, because some were way better readers. They were way faster at reading, and I was not. I was not that fast. I was not a solid reader. I struggled to read words. So as we would do popcorn read, I wasn't paying attention at all because I was counting my classmates, and I was saying, okay, well, if they read about these 2 sentences and then the next one reads about these 2 sentences, when it comes to me, I should read about these somewhere in this area. So I would sit there and I would practice reading those lines that I thought were going to be my lines coming up. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And sometimes I had to read things that I didn't practice reading, right? But I wasn't comprehending anything then because I wasn't listening to what my classmates were reading. I was focused on me trying to make sure that I didn't mess up in front of my class. So let me know that too, right? If any of these things are like, yep, 1, that was me, or 2, I understand now where some of these skills and challenges have come, the struggles for your child. I would love to know. So those are some of the things we need to practice reading with our children and building their confidence, because that's just as important as the reading skills themselves. We want our children to be so confident that they can read out loud in front of anyone, that they don't struggle to read. And if they do struggle, they're not embarrassed by it. And they're saying, yeah, I need a little help with this word. Build up their confidence. It's so, so important. So what I just want to leave you with is the reading struggles can be supported at any age. I work with children of all ages, and we focus on the skills that they're struggling with the most. And yes, while they may know how to read and they can get through, did they actually comprehend what they read? Probably not. And how can we increase their speed, their fluency? And what if they are struggling to say those bigger words? How are we breaking those words up? Maybe they missed the skill on the blends, and maybe they missed, a lot of it at the TION, that sound, that shun sound. Like they don't understand that. And how spelling is so important for, like, when I teach the reading fundamentals, it's spelling, it's writing, it's grammar, it's all of the things all together, the phonics, the sounds, the sight words, the reading, the comprehension, the fluency, like it is all together because it is all so important for their development. Not just one piece, not just be really good at saying these sight words. No, there are still letters in that sight word that you can sound out. One of the words was mountain. I don't know why that word keeps sticking in my head. And yes, some of that, is a more difficult word. The letters don't say the same sound that we would think, but they can still sound out. Ow, ten, right? There's an A in there, but like allowing them to know, like, yeah, this is how it's spelled, but it doesn't necessarily sound that way. And just giving them that confidence and being funny about it and saying, I don't know what they were thinking, but it's allowing them to kind of like feel safe. And again, we're going to talk more about that because I just preparing for this episode, that is kind of what came up for me. Is I've worked with so many students that during their crucial years of learning, there were some traumatic situations going on in their life. And now, as they're trying to read, it's a struggle for them. Well, why is that? Because during that time, they were in fight or flight. They were in survival mode. So trying to read was not what their body and their brain was trying to do. Their body was protecting them. And we're going to talk all about that because that is something that I have been diving more and more in personally. And it's just been so helpful to be in this like regulated nervous system for so many things. So we're going to talk more about that for you, mama, and for your kiddos as well. So I just want to leave you with this piece of encouragement. 1, you're not alone. 2, I'm right here to support you. And 3, small daily habits make a huge difference. Read with your kids. It's so powerful. Grab a book that you may have read 100 times. Read it again. Go to the library, get some new books. Read them out loud. Have quiet time and say, okay, it's time for everyone to read. I miss reading out loud with my kids, and we do it during school. But like stories at bedtime, they now both go in their rooms and read their chapter books. And I'm like, I miss our story time. But I love that they love reading. And that's what they do right before they go to bed. And it just is so peaceful for their body to be able to do that. So remembering that going backwards to practice skills that may have been missed is not a failure, right? It's not like, oh my goodness, we have to go backwards. Like, how are we ever going to get caught up? That's what you need. You need to go backwards sometimes. And it's never too late to build that strong reading foundation. And just a reminder that every child truly learns on their own timeline. They are all unique individuals. And I like to say they're perfectly unique because they truly are. And they are learning right at the time that best fits their needs and your family's needs. So if you are with me today and you're like, okay, my kids have missed some of these skills, and you're like, all right, it's good to know that I'm not alone, but what do I do next? Well, the great news is I am right here to support you in many different ways. So there are episodes that I share more about this. You can definitely check out some of the episodes here. But also I have a reading fundamentals program where I am walking alongside you and your family and is custom to meet your needs. Now the program is set, but where your child starts is based on their needs. And we figure out where that is and put them where they're at. And I walk alongside you and I share the resources, I share the videos, and just those skills to be able to catch them up or help them to be a better reader, a more confident reader. Maybe they're just learning how to read. And you're like, I don't want to mess it up. I want to make sure that they know how to read and have a good, solid start. Well, that's what the reading fundamentals is all about. Making sure that they have a very good, solid start and reading all the way through. So there is an interest form in the show notes below for the reading fundamentals. Go ahead and click on that and fill that out. It just shares more about your child's strengths and challenges and the goals so we can determine the best steps together. And just remember that it's all about building confident readers. It's not about pressure or perfection. It's not about comparing our children to someone else's child or to the standards. It's really about meeting your child where they're at and raising confident readers. Well, thanks guys so much. I cannot wait to chat with you again next week. Thank you for tuning in to the Home Education with Ease podcast. I hope today's episode left you feeling empowered and ready to take the next steps on your home education journey. Your support means the world to me. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend. For even more resources, be sure to join the free Facebook group, Home Education with Ease, and visit eduplaylearning.com to explore programs and subscription kits. You can find the links and any other links mentioned in this episode in the show notes below. Remember, you're not alone. This community is here to support you every step of the way.